This is Power BI and more. This episode is brought to you by Maplytics by Inogic. Maplytics by Inogic is a market-leading certified for Microsoft Dynamics 365 geoanalytical mapping app. Maplytics empowers users with powerful map visualization and routing capabilities within Dynamics CRM to better drive sales, improve business processes, and engage the right customers at the right time. Inogic is a leading Microsoft Gold Dynamics CRM ISV delivering best-in-class Dynamics 365 solutions as well as cost-effective and high-quality programming services. We thank Maplytics by Inogic for sponsoring Power BI and more from CRM Audio. Well, Ulrik, happy Independence Day. How are you doing?
Thank you, Joel. Happy Independence Day to you, too.
Happy Canada Day to our Canadian friends, too.
All right. It's coming up, too.
It's already been. It was yesterday.
All right. I should have known. I have family in Canada.
All right. So in the spirit of Independence Day, what do we have for BI and analytics and Power BI?
So we have a couple of things. I feel like we're in the holiday break and not too much is happening right now. But actually, in the late June update of the Power BI desktop client, a couple of new updates came out, as they do every month. We try to keep on top of what's going on. And something actually happened with the oData connection during this update, which means that we can now use the new version. And it was always interesting when we see like these updates coming out every month, and usually there are a couple of updates on the oData connection, a few performance improvements here and there. So I kind of stopped paying too much attention to it because it was just performance improvement here and there. But now we can actually use the 9.0 endpoint instead of 8.2. So if you happen to have a Dynamics 365 online on the latest version, and your service root URL in your settings says, your CRM org URL.api, etc., /9.0, then you can actually use it. Until then, we had to manually change that 9.0 back to version 8.2 in order to retrieve any of the data. If we left at 9.0, we just get a metadata error. But now we can actually use it. And with it, the new version comes a number of performance improvement that we can take advantage of. And I think when you're creating new reports, one of the things that's been a bit of a hassle with Power BI is that you connect it, you put in your service root URL, and then you wait a long time for it to load all the data, all the entities, all the fields, etc. It kind of takes a while to navigate through that whole thing. In particular because Dynamics 365 have so many different entities and so many different attributes, etc. And one of the main improvements on the new version is actually on the navigation itself, which means that I haven't been timing it, but it feels like it's about 3 times faster than navigating with version 8.2 on the same environment. So you can try out the different versions. So just, getting your list of entities, getting your list of fields, and actually getting started is definitely a lot faster than it used to be.
Okay, so here's a question for you. In the past, like episode 31, we talked about the old versus the new oData connection. And now we're talking about the V9 oData connection. Is this a new version of the new oData connection?
So that's a good question. So in 31, this is still version V4. So this is oData V4.
Okay.
But we're talking about the 9.0 endpoint from Dynamics 365.
Okay, so we're still talking about using the same oData connection, but we're talking about connecting to the V9 connection, V9
Correct.
version of that.
Correct, and using some of the performance improvements that Power BI and the desktop client have made in order to retrieve that data. Because it's not just the navigation that's faster itself. Actually refreshing the data is also significantly faster. I'd say like somewhere between 50 and 80% faster than the 8.2. So you can definitely feel an improvement in speed when you are refreshing all of your data via the new version instead of using the old one.
Okay, so if you wrote something with version 8 and it's using the V8 endpoint and the new one's out, other than the speed, are there other reasons you should rush out and change your reports and dashboards? Is the V8 connection going away sometime soon?
So it is. I haven't seen any information about it potentially going away. So as long as that endpoint is supported, you will still be able to use it. I would recommend updating it for a specific reason, because the way the Power BI desktop client works is that in order to take advantage of using version 9, you actually need a couple extra parameters in the query itself. So when you have your service root URL, you actually need 2 extra parameters in there. One of them specifying the implementation version of this one, so you can take advantage of the added speed and faster refresh rates. So those parameters needs to be added to your Power Query string inside Power BI, and if they are not, you just change 8.2 to 9.0, then you're going to get a metadata error. It's going to break. It's not going to work. You can't see what's actually wrong. So whenever you create a new report from scratch and connect it to Dynamics 365, all those parameters will actually be included by default. But just updating old reports, they'll continue to run as they are now, but just in updating the old reports, you're going to have to make those updates manually in order to take advantage of it. So in order to keep everything the same and take advantage of it over time, I would definitely update my reports and making sure that we have everything is up to date and running on the latest version. And there's an assumption in there, of course, is that you are on a Dynamics 365 instance that is already using 9.0. If you are still on version 8.2 or earlier, you still have to use the old version. However, any Power BI reports you do today will include those extra parameters, assuming that you downloaded the June version. Will include those parameters, as you can just update it to 9.0 in the future.
Okay, so you're saying if you're on 8.2 and you write a report now using the new version of the desktop, when you go to V9, you don't have to add those parameters; they'll just be there. Right.
All you have to do is basically go in and update version 8.2 and change that out to 9.0 or whatever version that you're updating to at the time.
Okay, that's great.
And that'll work. All that being said, though, with the oData being faster, it's seemingly using fetch XML through Power BI still seems to be a little bit faster, and of course has some additional advantages that we talked about too. So I just want to mention that even though you see some significant improvements on the oData, we still have some other option there that definitely can perform. And then of course there's a whole data export service and using an SQL database that just in my early testing here is still about twice as fast as the latest version of the oData connection.
So your recommendation would be
options.
Still to test your other connections, be it the export service or fetch, to see between that and oData what gives you optimal performance.
Right, and it also depends, like, do you actually need the performance in some of these scenarios? Then that kind of depends on what you're doing, what you're putting together, how you're getting the data, how fast you can put everything together. Because once you've created your report and you upload it and it just refreshes by itself, it doesn't matter if it takes 15 minutes or 20 minutes in order to refresh. At those points, it's probably not as important, but definitely when you're sitting there and creating the report and refreshing the data and working with the previews, the added speed makes a big difference. It's just much nicer to work with. And then you're probably thinking, hey, all those version 9, etc., new parameters, etc., does that work in that Power Query builder that you've been talking about for the XrmToolBox? And of course, yes, it does. We have actually been implementing those extra parameters, etc. So you can take advantage of it in the Power Query builder that Mohammed and I have been creating inside the XrmToolBox. So all of those information, parameters, etc. are included. And what we're doing now is that we actually added a number of additional features to it. Last time we talked about it, we had some information on the oData connection. So it basically automates pulling out the specific fields, renaming them, changing the data types, etc. Just automating everything that you would otherwise sit and spend your time doing in the Power BI desktop interface. On top of this, we've added more options for using fetch XML as well. So you can actually now build the fetch XML query for you and pull all the data, do the renaming, and change the data types as well, which is very important on the fetch version, because when you pull data into Power BI via fetch XML, everything gets tagged as a data type any. So it's very difficult to do any kind of calculations, and you have to sit there and change all the data types with the individual fields. So that part is being automated as well for all the number fields and date fields and text fields and so on. So you don't have to do that, and of course change out the names. And then of course when we use the fetch XML, we have the privilege of also retrieving the formatted values. So whenever we have a lookup field, for example, or we have an option set, or we have a status field, which in the oData, you basically just have either the GUID or the value of the option set, we can bring in the actual value or the label value of that specific field. So we have our relationship type on the account entity, for example. We can pull in the value that it says customer instead of value number 2 or whatever it
Can you get
be.
both if you want the GUID and the value?
And you can get both. So we have actually made an extra step. When you generate the fetch XML, you know, as most XrmToolBox tools, you open it up, you load all the entities, you select an entity that you want to work with, and from there you can select a view, or you can select the individual fields that you're interested in pulling into your Power BI report. And when you do that and you select the Fetch XML option, that's actually an additional step that lets you select what fields where you want the formatted value and where you want the actual value. And by default, it'll include everything. So if you, for example, have the relationship type that I was talking about on the account, they'll actually break into, you select the relationship type, they'll actually break into 2 fields. One that's called relationship type and will have the actual label, like what you would expect, and one called relationship type, and then in parentheses the schema name, customer type code of that specific field that'll contain the value. And the same thing for lookup fields. So if you have your primary contact, you can bring in both the name of the primary contact as well as the unique ID of the contact that's included there. So you basically get all the data that's in the system.
And what about the option sets where you got multi-language? How do you handle that?
Right, so we actually have a separate query too. So if you do need additional information or those additional languages, we actually provide those queries for the option sets separately. So you can use those and bring in a query just for the option set, so you can work use your own DAX logic, etc., your own queries to get the information. But the query itself for the option set has been provided. So that's actually a part of the tool on getting all that information out. And if you do that, you can not just necessarily just get all the option set and all the languages and the language codes. That table actually also contains information about the colors for the option sets. So as you know, in the new user interface, you actually have some different colors. You can select colors per the different option set values. They'll be used in your dashboards and views, etc. Throughout Dynamics. You can actually pull that data in and use them in your Power BI report. So you're basically reusing the same color scheme through pulling that information, and I can use those color codes. It's not supported by all the different visuals yet. I know it's on the wish list on the for Power BI team and in the community. But some of the custom visuals do use those colors, so you can use those as markers and basically have the same color scheme without necessarily need to think too much about whenever the metadata, etc., has been updated in Dynamics, that'll automatically trickle through to your Power BI reports as well. So all that information there is basically being brought in. A few things that we're still working out. We've just actually, in this version that we're going to release here, whenever it's morning in Australia next, where Mohammed is now located, he'll put out the latest version. He sent it to me today. I've been playing with it throughout the day and sent him a message that whenever you wake up, definitely put update it. So I believe around the time that this podcast is being published, the new version should be available too. So you can try out the Fetch XML in all the other versions in there. And we've also applied filters. So if you select a view, and it'll bring in all the fields, it'll also apply the filter from that view into the tool itself, so you don't necessarily need to pull all the records and everything that you're doing. And we're still working on some additional features, so we'll be talking more about it as we go along. But we definitely want to make sure that support some of the fetch XML features where you can bring in fields from related entities, so you can bring that into one table. You don't necessarily need to bring those in on separate tables as you do now in the tool, and add some more cleanup options and perhaps some more accelerators and auto-generating links to the individual records and so on. Stuff that you generally do on most records and transformations that you do anyway. So I'm kind of excited to put out this latest version here. I'm pretty happy with it. I've been using it. I actually primarily use that now whenever I need to do any kind of Power BI work and query on a new environment. I'm using that tool myself, so it's kind of nice to be able to take advantage of the tools that you're putting out there at the same time.
Have you gotten any good feedback from users or requests?
So, yes, and actually former Power BI and more host Scott Sewell have been sending us a lot of requests and comments that we've been taking into account. So he's been sending us more than we've been able to put in at this time, but we're definitely working through all the features that we want to put in. So he's been kind of. I know. So sometimes it sounds like he has his own wish list for what the tool can do, and we try to put most of it in there. I'm sure
they're all good ideas too.
Absolutely. So he's been coming with some very nice comments, good comments, constructive comments as we've been working through it. We've also been sending him some versions before we put them out online, so been getting some good feedback there. And then also from the first version that we put out in the tool, we got some good feedback too, which was a fairly limited version of the tool compared to the one that's going to be accessible now. You have a lot more features and a lot more things that you can do with this version here. Specifically the fetch XML, etc., that you can work with and do a lot of the transformations there. And really speed up the creation of those Power BI reports.
So what's the best way for people to get you feedback, or if they have requests for new features, should they put that in through the GitHub repository? Should they email it to you? What's the best way to get that to you?
So the best way for suggestions and features, comments, and training on how to use it, I'll recommend putting that on my blog on xrmchatguy.com. There's actually a page specifically for the Power Query Builder. So check that out and put your comments in there, and I'll check it out. Any bugs or situation stuff that's not working on the tool, I try to recommend people to go into the GitHub repository there and report it there, so we can get it fixed as soon as possible.
Okay, great. Well, if you haven't checked it out, go get it, add it to your XrmToolBox, and start doing your Power Queries.
All right, sounds good.
All right. Did you get accepted for any sessions at the CRMUG Summit?
I did. I have 2 sessions.
Okay.
One on using Power BI and Dynamics 365 together. So a lot of tips and tricks on how to create links back and forth and basically use the data and really address a lot of the quirks and situations around using Dynamics 365 data in Power BI. And then I have a session on the standard charts called Charts with XrmToolBox, where I'll go through how to update it, how to use the different tools that are available in the toolbox to accelerate it, and kind of give people some ideas of what can they do with charts fairly easily that goes beyond what you can do with the built-in editor. And that's a session that I've been preparing and structuring in a manner where you don't necessarily have to be a chart expert. There should be something for everyone. So if you've been customizing charts for a while, hopefully you'll learn some new stuff, maybe see some new ways of doing it. And if you don't have any experience with it at all, come check it out and see how we do it, because I'm going to use do most of the things using the tools that are available, so we don't necessarily have to open up the XML code and start doing editing, etc., like we used to do in the past. So hopefully there will be a lot of people there. That's definitely one of the sessions, both sessions, I'm excited to do.
Yeah, that's great. Great. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm starting to work on my sessions. Lots of stuff to do over the summer to get ready for that.
Right. And when we get a little closer, I would like to do a recap of all the business intelligence sessions that are Dynamics 365 business intelligence sessions that are at the UG Summit, and kind of give some guidance on, what sessions to go to depending on your current needs.
That'd be great to do on a future episode. So, all right, Ulrik, well, for those of you listening who are grilling during this episode, be sure to be careful not to burn yourself while you're listening to it. And have a great Independence Day, and we'll talk to you next time, Ulrik.
All right, thank you, Joe.